Where am I?
In the village.
What do you want?
Information.
Whose side are you on?
That would be telling. We want information. Information. Information.
You won't get it.
By hook or by crook, we will.
Who are you?
The new number 2.
Who is number 1?
You are number 6.
I am not a number. I am a free man.
Ah, 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 ah!
Hello, listeners of the Mad Scientist Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Cogswell. Although I guess I am...
Otherwise, number 6.
I guess I am your host, number 6. I am joined by the dastardly number 2.
Marie Mayhew.
Marie Mayhew. What a wonderful... Okay, so this episode will be talking about one of the most important science fiction television shows of all time. The Prisoner.
Yes. The Prisoner.
Now, The Prisoner is... It's a show that a lot of you probably... A lot of younger listeners, even listeners like... I mean, younger listeners, Jesus. Listeners my age even, or Marie... I mean, Miri, even you're... Even like I would say our age groups were like... We're not in that area where it was like on TV, really.
Oh, God, no. Well, first of all, September of this year marks the 50-year anniversary of the filming and airing of The Prisoner.
It's one of those...
It is 50 years old.
And it's one of those shows that it has influenced so much of popular culture, so much of science fiction, of this, you know, just it has reverberations. This series has reverberations throughout all of the stuff that we love and that makes us excited about science in the modern world. And it's a show that, frankly, I don't think gets enough respect or love. I mean, it came out, I think partially it's because it ended the way it did. And I think it's also because of the...
True.
I also think because it really was very high-minded. And even today, it still deals with very important philosophical questions that we're still grappling with. So this episode, we'll be talking about The Prisoner, one of my favorite TV shows. Marie, I'm sure one of your favorites as well.
Absolutely.
Wonderful
Something
show.
that we bond on immediately.
Seriously.
And right after Giant Squid, what was the thing I said we had to talk about?
The Prisoner.
The Prisoner.
It's right there. All right, so residents of the village, plop on your numbered pins, get ready on your weird giant bikes, and we'll
set your bikes down.
And we'll be seeing you on this episode.
Be seeing you.
Welcome to the Mad Scientist Roundtable, episode 15, The Prisoner.
This week, we wanted to give a quick shout out to one of the newest members of the Dark Myths Podcast Network. This week, we're giving a shout out to the Let's Not Meet podcast. Let's Not Meet is so good. It is so scary. It is like, if you like some of the scarier shows on our network, like, Astonishing Legends, or more kind of like the narrative style, like Nighttime Podcast or Pleasing Terrors, I think you're going to really enjoy Let's Not Meet. They are just a phenomenal show. Andy's a great guy, the guy that runs it. What they do is they take stories from the Let's Not Meet subreddit, and they read them out in kind of the spookiest, coolest way possible.
Great, yeah, because we all don't need to sleep.
No, whatever. Sleep, yeah. Marie. Like I said to you the other day, we will sleep when we're dead.
Sleep when I am dead. Yeah.
For now, it is producing and creating podcast content
with all the lights on, jumping at every single noise in the house. Thank you, thank you, Dark Myths.
Yes. So that podcast again is Let's Not Meet. Check it out. You can find it on iTunes. You can find it, of course, through darkmyths.org. And we'll be posting a link to them over in the show notes for this episode. So go check it out. I really love one of the most important, or not the most important, one of the most interesting quotes I think from this show is the very beginning, one of the very first things that number 6 says when he wakes up in the village, he says, "I will not make any deals with you. I've resigned. I will not be pushed, filed, stamped, indexed, briefed, debriefed, or number. My life is my own." That's one of the central tenets of this show, The Prisoner. Now, for those that don't know, The Prisoner is a science fiction show that's set in the village. And so the only information we're given at the beginning of this show is that this main character, played by Patrick McGoohan, has seemingly resigned from an important government position in the United Kingdom. He seems to have resigned. He drives away in a Lotus 7 in the most badass car of all time.
And this is the open to every single episode, of which there were only 17, but of every single 17 episodes, they all open the same way.
They all open the exact same way, yeah.
Showing his resignation of this covert operative, highly secretive, the man who knows too much type of job.
And so what happens is he gets to his apartment and he's seemingly packing for a trip out of the country or something, and then basically a gas enters the room and knocks him out, and then he wakes up in this weird tropical setting where
he wakes up in a wonderland,
in an absolute, what appears to be a wonderland. All of his needs are taken care of. All of his food is provided for. It's like a perfect utopian society on the surface, except that everyone is numbered. No one's past is ever supposed to be talked about or remembered. And the whole point of this society, it turns out, is for the leaders of that society. And the ranking numbers of people in importance goes from the number, whatever the lowest number that there is, or the highest number, I suppose, all the way up to number 2, who is the leader of this island, of the village, as it's called. And then the eponymous number 1, who we never see in the series, but one of the big questions is, who is number 1, as we said in the intro.
Who is ultimately in control?
Who is in control of this society?
And I think it's worth mentioning that when he resigns, basically, he does so. It's same every 17 episodes. Comes in, drives the Lotus, which I couldn't remember what type of car it was, but it's just like it's a stunning car, and it's this sort of James Bondian music playing over, and he pulls up, and he gets out, and he storms down this dark hallway, and it's very starkly lit, and then he tirades to a man sitting behind a desk who is just sort of coldly, disinterestingly staring at him. And then, as Chris says, he storms back out and he gets back in his car, but he's somehow, and he drives to his London apartment, but he's followed by a hearse, right? And then he's going in, and you see him packing, and it looks like he's going somewhere tropical. And again, it's worthy to note that Patrick McGoohan is probably the archetype for James Bond. I mean, he looks the part. Before he was in The Prisoner, he was in a series called Danger Man that was on for 2 years, that was basically sort of the TV version of James Bond. So he has this whole provenance of this character already, and he's, this character now almost is carrying into this new series, and he's quit, and he's packing, and like Chris says, this gas floats through the keyhole and knocks him out cold. And it's so weird, because that's like every single time the story opens, that's what you're reminded of. Like, he quit. Oh, and the one most important thing I forgot, they show his card being lifted by a robotic hand, right? His identity card, and it types resigned or retired.
Yeah, I believe it says resigned, and then they put X's through his name. Or not through his name. They never show his name. They put X's through his face. His face. Picture.
Yes.
One important point of this show. So Marie says there's this aspect of repetition in the intro. There's also repetition in the episodes themselves, right? Each episode is set up as a sort of new a way for a new number 2, a new leader of the village, to take a crack at number 6.
Yes.
So Patrick McGowan's character, the main character, is only known throughout the series as number 6. You're never given his name. You're never given any background info on him, except for some basic kind of stuff. Like we can tell kind of that he worked for MI6 or some important government agency of some kind. It appears clear that he has information that they want in the village. That's why every episode starts with that intro where they say, we want information. They want to know what he did. And specifically what they want to know is why he resigned. Why did he resign from this service that he was working in? But it's a very interesting thing. Every episode, the character, well, except for a few, there are a few returning number 2s. But the setup of this series is number 6 wakes up back in the village. He wakes up in the village. We don't know the timeline of these episodes really, except for the very intro and the very end. That's the only 2. And the 2 last ones go in order. Those are the only 2 we really know where they fit in the timeline, frankly.
And we'll talk about the timeline of the entire 17.
It's very important.
It is interesting.
He wakes up in the village. He meets with number 2. Number 2 says, we want information. And then number 2 introduces him to basically what number 2 is going to try to do to get this information from number 6. And the really interesting part of it, I think, for me, is it deals with a lot of topics of social control, a lot of topics about where society was going at that time period in the 60s when the show came out, that are it's really interesting. It's fascinating where they thought it was going to go and how close we've gotten to almost living in a village of our own. It's a little frightening, in fact.
Yeah. Well, for 50 years ago, it was pretty, it's held up really well. And I think that, like, again, when he wakes up in the village, he's got a new set of clothes. The village itself, like Chris said, it was actually filmed in an actual island off of Wales. And all of these, it's very quaint and it's very colorful and it's very almost surreal. Like
it looks like a resort.
It does look like, but like a resort sort of on acid in some ways. Like, everything is just the scale's a little quirky. Like they have a giant chessboard in the middle of their town square. And they've got this, things are oddly colored, and it's just very, it's charming, but at the same time, it's almost, it's so sweet it makes your teeth hurt, kind of.
Yeah. You find out very quickly. Number 6 realizes very quickly that in some ways everyone else in the village but him appears in some way or is potentially a plant of number 2. Working to break number 6. So in the very beginning of the series of the episodes, he kind of tries to break out relatively frequently. And every time, of course, he fails. And he ends up back in the village, no matter how perfectly it seems that his plan would go. And so what he finds out, what he ends up realizing is, in fact, that all of his neighbors, everyone he meets in the village, everyone he's friendly with, all of these people he cannot trust them.
There's nothing that he can trust.
Because there's no way to know. There's no way to know, right, what is actually happening. And that's really the important point here, is that all of his privacy, everything he reads, all the information they're given, everything they eat, when they sleep, when they wake up, all the clothing, everything is designed by and given to them from the people in charge of the village. And they even have, what's kind of interesting is they even have things like, one of my favorite episodes, Marie, is when they have the election for the new number 2.
Oh, yes.
And number 6 is put in the running for number 2, for the new number 2. And his whole platform is, okay, well, we're going to tear down the system. And of course, the system is running the election, right? So no matter what number 6 does, he's working within his system. And so no matter how
getting away from it.
No,
There's
but
yeah.
But again, it's an interesting philosophical concept, this one of, and actually I think this is one of my favorite concepts that's in the show. There are a few, so I think we did a pretty okay job of running down the basic premise of the show, but let's just go through it again really quick for people.
Yes.
Number 6 has resigned from his job.
Yes.
He wakes up in this paradise / prison. Everything he does is watch.
Surrounded by cheerful people.
Everything he does is
cheerful.
Everyone is cheerful. Everyone is for the system. Everyone is watching him, and he is in a game basically with this person number 2, and ultimately whoever is number 1, who want to break him and get the information from him in some way about why he resigned. Now each episode centers around a different method of breaking number 6. So there's an episode where they create a computer that has all of the knowledge in the known universe supposedly, and it basically they give it to the people of the village that, oh, you can learn things overnight, right? You can listen to this tape and learn things right away. But what's actually happening as you learn things is you're being fed information and being kind of almost hypnotized or tricked into giving up what you know about, the Secret Service or whatever that you were a part of, right? And at the end of the episode, number 6 destroys the machine in a very cliched kind of way. He gives the professor, as the robot's known, a question. He feeds in a question to the computer, and he goes into the room, he feeds it a question, and the computer explodes in flames. And the number 2 of that episode is like, "What did you do?" And he's like, "I just asked it a simple question. WHY." And then he leaves he drops the mic and he leaves the room, and number 2 is just like, "What?" Right? And that's, of course,
again.
It's become such a cliched thing. But at the time, that's a very, it's a very, I don't know, provocative isn't the word, but it's a very resounding statement. Right? A computer mind will never be a human mind.
Yeah.
Right?
And it's 1967.
Yeah.
It's the Summer of Love has not come up yet. It's just starting to crest. This is also a British series. We should probably spell that out very clearly.
Yeah.
But this is and it is a very, I feel like it is very British in a lot of ways. There's a lot of, the number 2s are these, the villain per episode is these awesome archetypes of, one can be very conniving and very, plotting, and then the other one is just, is going to buddy up to number 6 to, to charm him, and it's very, but it's happening before sort of the whole idea of the American, idea of the individual and Summer of Love and freedom and tune in, turn on, drop out type of thing happens.
Yeah.
And it's sort of its predecessor, because it's about what is freedom? How are you truly free? If you are put in this beautiful utopia where all of your needs are taken care of, and really you can while away the rest of your days on drugs, which I think they allude heavily that they're drugging their population.
There is
right?
an episode specifically where they're using drugs to reprogram people.
That's right.
Right? And that's the thing is, like Marie said, the main I would say the main not focus, but maybe the main problem that faces number 6 in the village is this idea of personal freedom, right? Yeah. What does it mean to be free in a society like the village? But in many ways, the show kind of shows us that the village is very similar to our own societies, right? So that episode with the drugs, right, has a lot of interesting implications for things like psychotherapy, right?
Yes.
Where they are taking someone who doesn't seem to fit the mold of what the society wants, they are reprogramming them with drugs, and then they come out and maybe they're no longer, I forget the word they use. I think it's like, I don't think it's abnormal. I think it's like, oh my God, it's something like, just like disruptive. I think it's disruptive maybe is the word, but they, someone that doesn't fit the mold of what society wants. And then is it right for then society to fix this person if they could be happier in the society?
Well,
right.
yeah.
What is the cost? What is the cost of happiness? If happiness costs your freedom,
Yeah.
if happiness costs your
the trade-off, right?
Is that the trade-off you should make?
Yeah.
And the thing is, too, we're never told, number 6 may have resigned for some stupid reason. Right? He never,
Exactly.
it's never given.
You always make me fly, coach.
Yeah, it's like, he might have resigned because they got rid of the Twix in the coffee room.
Exactly.
He's like, I've told you 1,000,000 times. I need my
love
Twix. He gets rid of it and he's like, I'm out. And they send him to this island. Now, one of my favorite, like I said, one of my favorite topics, one of my favorite motifs that comes up again and again and again in the series, and ends up being kind of the penultimate, I don't know if lesson is the right word, but the penultimate idea of the prisoner is that you can only rebel within the confines of what society will allow you to do. Right?
Yes.
It's a very interesting philosophical idea that was very prevalent at the time, and in fact, it made the hippies very angry because they thought, well, this is bullcrap, man, But the idea is that what a society will do is it will co-opt your rebellion and sell it back to you.
Back to you, yeah.
So
absolutely.
it becomes innocuous, right?
Yes.
So a really good example would be, for instance, shirts that say Black Lives Matter being sold at your local mall, right?
Yes.
Or shirts that say like girl power and stuff on them being sold at the Gap, or like these structural systems that have previously put you down are only giving into some of your flights of fancy so that they can control you more strongly in some other way.
And so they can also commodify it, right?
Exactly.
Like the idea of the teenager.
Yes.
When we came about in the late 50s.
Oh my God. One of the most perfect examples of this is Hot Topic. Right? Hot Topic is like the perfect.
Oh man, there goes
the perfect version of this.
I'll tell you what, dear listener, I love Hot Topic. You love Hot Topic. We're gonna have to let Chris have his flight of fancy on.
Okay. Listen. Punk, like think about how there's that, what is that song, that song by NoFX that's like, when did punk rock become so safe, right, is one of the opening lines.
Oh,
right?
Or The Dead Milkmen, You'll Dance to Anything, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Instant club
right?
hit. Yep.
Yes. The idea, like, punk rock used to be about, like, back when punk rock started with like the Sex Pistols, I mean, it was always kind of a weird commodification of things that were, like the Sex Pistols were managed outside of a sex shop. That made a killing on leather, chaps and stuff that they sold to skinny Brits who were shooting up heroin and stuff. These cultural movements that are meant to kind of overthrow the system only go so far, right? So the hippies of the 60s now voted for Trump.
Ow! Oh! Yes.
But really though, like, and even Donald Trump, at a time when I was growing up, Donald Trump was almost not a dangerous figure per se, but was a very fascinating figure, right?
Yes.
And now the Republican Party, the party of old dudes, selling oil to each other, have taken a angry young movement and morphed it into their own thing. It's very strange.
And I think that that's one of the things that The Prisoner does so incredibly well is you are rooting for number 6. Again, you never get to learn his name. He never talks about what his name is. You're never allowed to know. You're rooting for him to break free, right? You're like, come on, man, like, I just fucking, fake your death. Just, jump in the whatever. And there are times, there's an episode where you think he does it, which I think the chimes of Big Ben, right?
Yeah.
He stows away. Someone helps him. He gets out. But it's all just an extended ploy to break his morale. Because when he wakes up, he's back where he started.
What ends up happening, actually, the ending of this episode is, so first off, I just want to say for our listeners who are of a conservative bend, right? The left, the young kind of like left-leaning population, I would say, the progressive population, historically has been the population that is the most easy to control in this way. I think if we look at
absolutely.
If we because it's like this, it's specifically the adoption of new cultural things and new ways to rebel against society that become so easily sold back to them, right?
Of course, rebellion sells.
Exactly, rebellion does sell, and so it's kind of this idea of it's a reason why a lot of deranged people take this idea of rebellion to a stronger place, right? Where you can't just rebel within the confines of society. You have to flip. You have to, you can't win. You can't break free of the game of chess by playing on the board. You have to flip the table over, right, in some way. And so anyways, so I just wanted to make that point clear when I was pointing out the recent use of this kind of technique, or maybe it's not even a technique. It's just something that kind of happens. It seems like where the powers that be utilize what's selling, and if what's selling at the moment is rebellion, they're going to sell that. At the moment, the rebellion that's selling is a rebellion towards anti-politician sentiment.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and the thing is rebellion always sells. It always sells better than establishment.
It does, but it's very interesting that you have people like Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell who are like, if they were any more swampy, they'd have algae growing on their legs, saying, we're fighting the swamp, right? Well, you're not. You're not. Maybe this guy wanted to, but you're not. Anyways, whatever.
Well, so, you're assuming that they'd stand. They can't stand because they have no spines. So.
Okay, fine. Okay, all right. I gotta do political. So in the chimes of Big Ben, what's really fascinating actually is at the end, he seems to make his way all the way back to his home.
Yes,
right
to London.
I think he
did it.
I think what ends up happening is he makes his way back. He basically, him and another islander, another villager, I guess, plan his escape together. And so he supposedly makes it all the way back to London, and he's hearing the chimes of Big Ben from the office of his old boss. And his old boss says to him, oh, by the way, why did you resign? And he looks at him and he goes, wait. And based on the number of chimes of Big Ben, he realizes that the time is wrong. The clock on the wall has a different time. Like it says 6, but it just rang like 12 times or something. And so he goes to the window and he rolls up the blinds and it looks back out to the village.
Oh.
And he just leaves. He just walks out of the room. Right?
And you're just like, what?
It kills you. It kills you. And
and there is this sort of visceral reaction because you're just rooting for him. You're like, first of all, like this dude, like he's served his time, right? He served his country. He just wants to pack a bag, go to the Bahamas, have a Mai Tai. No, they're just going to keep this stranglehold on him, and you're just like, oh man, come on, just let it. He's so close. No.
So the other really interesting thing that happens is with this idea of the kind of the co-opting of revolution and using it to reinforce previous standards or previous ways of being, right? You have the last 2 episodes are kind of a really strange. They're the first time that a number 2 has come back, really, for an extended period of time. So this number 2 comes back for like 3 episodes, and it's the first time anyone gives any indication, besides number 6, that this number 2 is actually a new number 2. In all other cases, everyone in the village acts like this guy's been number 2 forever. This person has been number 2. No matter how obviously the change, there are episodes where it goes from like it's a fat British dude. Yeah, it's a fat British dude to like a fit woman. Like, you know what I mean? Yeah. It changes significantly.
Yeah, that was Free for All, right? That was
I think so, yeah. And so so this last episode, it becomes this weird almost deconstruction of number 6 as a person, right? It's like the plan is to bring him all the way back to being a child and reinstill in him a sense of loyalty to number 2. Number 2 is like his mother, like his family, and rebuilding him up and whatever. And it ends with like a super weird, trippy, like, there are men in robes holding a mock trial where they're singing Dry Bones, right? And like, it's just so strange. And then at the end, he escapes, seemingly. He jumps onto a rocket. So first off, what happens is
you're all the way to the very, very end. Well, Fallout. I thought you were talking about Hammer and Anvil.
No. So what? Right, so at the very end. Sorry, go ahead. At the very end of the series.
Spoiler alert.
So at the very end of the series.
Wait. Good Lord, man. Good Lord.
I'm sorry. I'm so excited.
Hold on. We should say this is not a recap. If you haven't seen this, we would strongly encourage you to watch it regardless of what we come up with and what we tell you, because it's that good of a series. Now, and he's not just on a rocket, he's on a nuclear warhead.
Yes, right? That's true.
Yes.
So
he's gone through all of these iterations. He's been broken down by all of these different number 2s, and it's also worth it to say that, again, 17 episodes. When this showed in America, it went up against like Sabrina the Witch kind of thing, right? So it's like it was very popular, but in Britain, after the very last episode aired, there were just like riots. People were pissed. People were so mad with Patrick McGowan because they had no idea, because they don't give a neat and tidy end in a lot of ways.
Okay,
for what the end episode is.
Yeah. So what?
Which I will not. Yes.
So he goes through. There's 2 episodes at the end. Mm-hmm. He goes through the first one. The first one is this number 2 comes back and breaks him all the way down. But at the end of the episode, number 6, his mind stays intact. His mind, stays to where it is, where I am not, I'm a free person. I have a name. I'm not a number. Mm-hmm. And I am an individual. And I'm not going to tell you why I resigned. I'm not going to give you this information. And the next episode is number 2 reporting his failure, and the village, the elders of the village, the leaders of the village, this secret group of people who have been working in the shadows, say to number 6, well, you've beaten us. You've done everything we can possibly do to you. Right? And you've made it through. And so you're going to get to meet number 1, and then you get to decide what happens to the village or not. Right? And so he makes his way to out of this kind of like weird courtroom procession that's occurring to judge him and his methods and his mind. He makes his way out of this kind of kangaroo court style thing and makes his way into a room where number 1 is. And he sees the robe with number 1. Number 1 is standing there as the robe that says number 1 on him. He's standing there with this robe on. He flips him over and he pulls off the mask. And first he sees he's wearing a plastic monkey mask.
Yeah.
And then he rips that off and it's him.
Yes.
He is number 1.
He is.
But is he? 1. Is he?
Well, but they disclose that at the very beginning of every episode.
Every episode started, who is number 1?
You
are number 6.
Number 6.
So he then pushes the button for this bomb to, in theory, destroy the village. It's never really made clear what the bomb will do. But he then makes his way out of this area, and he, this whole time you're trying to figure out, he's trying to figure out, where is the village, right? And it finally kind of gets figured out that, okay, well, it must be in It must be in Eastern Europe somewhere, close to the Russian border, maybe, whatever.
Yes.
Or like in the Mediterranean. It's not clear at all where this village is. He makes it out of the village, and he ends up driving through a wall, and it turns out he has been all of 20 miles from London the whole time.
Yes.
And and there is no real conclusion to the series, right?
No, because he goes home, he opens his front door, and then they pan to what his address is. And his address is
number 6.
Number 6. So it's just this, like, he doesn't. First of all, like, the idea of it, again, like, it's very, Oedipus, right? The one that he was seeking, the person that was supposed to have the answers, that was, the prophecy, it was him the entire time.
It was him the entire time, yeah.
Right? And then is it
even
real? Is it even a real place? Like, was this all in his mind?
Well, the bigger point that I find really fascinating with the last episode is he escapes the village only to find out that he's been in London the whole time.
Yes.
Right? And I think that part is really actually a kind of a fascinating social commentary at the time, that this is like the village is almost like it's almost like a sideshow Hall of Mirrors look at our own societies.
Yes.
Right? You have episodes that deal with things like fraudulent elections. How real are elections, are democratic elections? How successful can a democratic election ever be to overthrow corrupt power sources if those are the people counting the votes, right?
Yes.
It talks about things like, what will automation do? What will the integration of the mind with a computer mean to freedom?
Oh,
right?
My God! But we didn't even discuss the idea of the security.
No, not yet. Well, we're getting there, Marie. We're getting there, Marie.
Oh my God!
And
all right, sorry, got my.
It's okay. Get all excited.
There for a second.
This show hits a lot of really important themes, I think. And yeah, one of the most important, in a lot of interesting ways, is the use of robotics may be a little generous of a term, but a non-human security force.
Well, and first of all, the entire island, every nook and cranny is mic'd or has surveillance, and it is all transmitted back to one supervisor who is basically security. And he is the same character the entire series, and he's got this huge wall of video monitors, and he's sitting and he's watching their every move. And if he sees number 6, making a break for it, or heading towards the water, or heading towards an outer perimeter, he actually picks up his giant black. They had like cell phones, like actual mobile phones, like giant black phone.
Yeah.
Picks it up and he's like, "Put me through to number 2. Looks like number 6. He's making a break for it. Sir, should I? I guess I'll have to deploy Rover." Right? Which is the security system.
Which Rover is a giant balloon.
So, but let's back this up, because this is a big point of contention. People who watch the series either find the idea of what their security system is seriously terrifying and
or hilarious,
existentially trippy, or just like, what the fuck. But Rover originally they did have like a fully robotic thing for it, but as soon as they got it on set, they realized it broke down a lot. It couldn't handle steps. And what were they going to do? Like, they can't just keep fixing it.
It was the 60s, and we had hardly developed computers, and they tried to build a robot.
They tried to assemble, not necessarily build, but like they're not going to build a robot for this.
I mean,
they budget, and they were cool.
Yeah.
So, but then they were like, shit, we're out of money. This thing can't handle sand. What are we going to do? And the idea that they came up with was like, just this ginormous, I want to say like maybe 7 to 8 foot in diameter white balloon that all of a sudden when they deployed it, surfaced from the water. They had this, this little montage of it coming up through the water, and then it just blows across the water and comes after people. Now, I think I'm in the camp where I think it is truly terrifying.
Me too. It's striking. It's like so, because okay, if it was a robot, first off, it would look. The one thing about this show is they used hardly no special effects, and where they did use them, they used them to great effect to be scary, to be off-putting.
Yeah,
right.
It's very creative.
It's kind of like
lack
how
of funds.
Well, it's almost like if you watch like a Muppet Christmas Carol, that doesn't look like it aged at all. Right, it's all just puppets and whatever. But if you look at, say, like Jurassic Park or the old Star Wars or whatever, you're like, oh, that's wow.
No, don't with the Star Wars.
Is that what computers did back then? Jeez.
Oh my god.
So really though, in the like practical effects always look better in my opinion.
Yes.
And
yeah.
And so Rover, so the idea of the scary thing with Rover is it's almost like high strangeness. Right, that term used for UFOs and UFO sightings. It's a giant white balloon, like a ball almost. It's perfectly spherical. It's a giant balloon, and it comes floating towards you at super speeds. And what it does is it envelopes you and causes you to pass out and become still, and then it transports you back to your room.
Yes, or it can also just suffocate you.
Or it can just kill you. Yeah, or it can just kill you.
Which, again, like, in this repressive regime is a pretty good analogy. Like, the final thing that's going to get you is
suffocation.
You're suffocated.
Yeah. And I think another part of why what makes it so scary is that it has, I mean, this sounds a little hokey. It has no face. It has no mind, right?
No.
There is no tell about what this thing is. If you're in the village and you're thinking or did something that you shouldn't have been thinking or doing, and you see Rover coming, there's no way to tell if it's coming for you or not. Right?
Exactly.
It's just going to float by, and sometimes it'll just be kind of there. And the thing is too, I don't think we mentioned this yet, it makes a terrifying sound.
Yes.
It's like, oh, it's so bad. And it's like high pitched and squeal. Oh my goodness. It's pretty unnerving. Really, it is. It's amazing.
It is a good fallback for like, and it is very creative, and it's almost like subconsciously
scary.
The people that were putting it together, it's horrifying subconsciously, but the people that were like, okay, this robot's not gonna, the thing that we put all of our money in isn't gonna work. And they conjured forth this thing that was truly what they were trying to get at in the first place. What's
kind of funny to me is too, they were kind of forced to think like almost like to think creatively on their feet, like you were saying, to get around a budgetary problem. But it's also kind of like if you were actually going to develop a all-terrain security item, something that floated and didn't, right? Like that's not a bad solution to that problem, right? That's a pretty creative, good solution, I would say.
And it is spooky as shit. And
very spooky.
That thing is like, and it just shows up. Shows up.
Yeah.
But I just I think with The Prisoner, one of the things that I'm always in awe of, again, like it is 50 years old, and you can look at it, and some of it is a little like, it's very quaint, but it's not cliched. It's not overly cliched. And I think now that you wouldn't have shows like Lost.
No,
I feel like
definitely not.
I feel like J.J. Abrams got Alias, right?
J.J. Abrams built a career off of The Prisoner.
He got a lot of like Alias. So the idea of the clandestine secret agent who's constantly fighting for her own identity. And then, again, like an island that nobody knows is there, but nobody knows what its true meaning is, and why are we here, and is there a bigger purpose? Like, there's so many shows that really should pay homage to The Prisoner. For a show that was only on for, like, 17 episodes, that's barely one season.
I think they came out once a year. Oh, not once a year, once a month though, didn't they? Which also built
still not a lot.
once or twice a month, which built up to the kind of finale sort of. Now, one interesting part. So, I think you're right. There's this idea of, I mean, we've always had since humans have worked together to create societies. There's been this idea of, let's say, control, power structures, silent control over the individual. Where is the trade-off between your individual liberties and the good of the society, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where is that trade-off? That's always kind of existed. Where The Prisoner kind of took it a step beyond is, I think, bringing in a lot of the philosophy of that time period, that developed right after around World War I to World War II until, say, the mid 60s. There was a really interesting subset of philosophy that came about called existentialism, right? And existentialism, really, where it started, and even who is considered an existentialist is it's hotly debated. Some people would consider Kierkegaard and Nietzsche to be existentialists. Some people wouldn't consider them to be that. They would consider them to be almost proto-existentialists, or there's all these kind of, I think the only person that everyone agrees is an existentialist is Sartre and Camus,
yes.
I think, and those are kind of the only two, I think those guys are on pretty much everyone's lists. But the idea, the general idea here is that what matters for an ethical life, for a moral life, is that you yourself live up to your own standards, and the structures and the kind of the, I don't want to say the stringent controls that society places on you, but almost, I mean, that is kind of what their point is that the controls that society places on you are only there to control you. They have no basis in any greater moral complexity or reason. And so you yourself, it's up for you, the individual, to make your own values always. Right? It's always up to you to make your own values. And so this gives us this idea of what is known as the existential hero, which is a character archetype where the individual acts within their own values, but not necessarily within the bounds of society, right?
Yes.
And so probably the most cliched version of the existential hero is the kind of anarchist, almost terroristic in some ways characters, right? So we have Fight Club, and we have V for Vendetta, and we have it's such a common trope, right? Even shows even movies or things like, say, the Hunger Games, right? In some ways, these people trying to live outside of the bounds of their society are in some ways existential heroes. But again, it's kind of this thing, and it gets built into as well this idea from Nietzsche's philosophy of the Übermensch. Again, a person who, by their own power of will, has superseded society and imposed their own rules on it, right? So kind of like a Napoleonic figure almost, although that's a little simplistic. But anyways, this prisoner is in many ways a perfect archetype, a perfect version of the existential hero, in that every episode, every time, everything is this person sticking to one value judgment, right? Number 6 has one thing that he knows is true, and that thing is that his freedom is his ultimate goal. His freedom is the most important thing, right?
Yes.
And to hell with everyone else. I don't think Number 6 really cares about anyone else in the village, right? He has no connections to them. He has no, right. I would argue he has no feeling for them, really, right? Because he views every member of society besides himself as a potential enemy, right?
Well, as a potential, as an obstacle.
Exactly.
Right? They will never get him to where he needs to go. And I think early on, I would even argue again, it's a lot of Joseph Campbell in the hero's journey.
Sure,
right? You
yeah.
start off, you're taken from what is familiar, you're put into an unfamiliar space, and you have to sort of navigate to what the final, to your point, what is your final truth? Like, what is the thing that is the reason that you are doing this? And to me, it's like, even though, he almost got stoned in the streets after the final episode aired, there's really no good way to end The Prisoner in a lot of ways, except for what he did, which was basically say the thing that, number 6 was always searching for, or was always looking for, was himself.
Right.
The only thing he wanted to find out that was going to give him freedom, and why are you persecuting me? Why do you keep hounding on me about the reason of who I am? Which is sort of which is a cloaked way of looking at, like, the information they wanted from him was, why did he resign? Why did he make the choice? Why did he execute free will?
Right.
And they keep pressuring him and they keep asking him, but the person who ultimately is asking him that is himself. Which is just like, again, for 1967 is like, mind blown. That's pretty good.
See, and that's the interesting thing, though, is that I think we actually have totally different readings of the show.
Really?
Yeah, and I've actually,
What?
and see, this is the thing, though, right?
Go on.
I've probably watched and rewatched The Prisoner in its entirety, like, I mean, over 50 times, easy. My mom bought like a DVD box set of it, and I just like binged the crap out of it all the time.
No, we have the box set now.
Oh, it's so good.
Yes,
good.
We do.
So
yes, we do.
Like, for me, it is that perfect existential fight where now that number 6 sees that the village exists, he'll never be happy again. He'll never be able to live in society again, right? Because what is to stop him from thinking that this is another trick, right?
Oh, no, I agree with you in that. Like, I agree, like, self-knowledge, the self-knowledge of him coming face to face with the thing that is keeping, his shackles firmly planted, is himself.
See,
is ultimately,
but that's the thing, right?
To me, ultimately not freedom.
That I think I agree with you on.
Right?
That the freedom he ends up with, and I think that's kind of a very cynical point that I think the show makes very well.
Or it's cynical of you and I to read into.
No, well, maybe.
How could that be?
I don't know. How can we be cynical?
How could that be, sunshine butterfly?
But this idea of freedom to choose is only freedom insofar as your choices are limited. So in other words, I think a perfect example of this is in elections, is in democracy, right? If we had voted for, if you vote for candidate A or candidate B, right? If regardless of who you voted for, we were going to go into another war, then it doesn't really matter who you vote for, right? Because the power structure is such that it'll keep things going the way it wants, right?
It's interesting because your reading of it with the existential is much more of a macro. I think, like, when I look at it, it's much more of a micro.
Yeah, see,
it's much more of the self, of his recognition of self.
See, I've always viewed the existential hero as a very like, I think when you mention even Joseph Campbell and that idea of, and so for those that don't know, who are listening, the idea that Joseph Campbell came up with is that there is like kind of a single archetype of the hero story that gets played again and again, right? It's kind of like, you got Luke Skywalker, you got Katniss Everdeen, you got Harry Potter, you got whatever. All these characters are all the same character. They're Hercules. They're over time this idea keeps coming back where it's like a person rises from obscurity to find out that they're part of a much more important system, that they are the central cog almost in this system, and they end up defeating a great evil that is a dark reflection of themselves, and then come to be whatever their final form, whatever that is.
Some sort of self-reckoning.
Yeah.
Which is not always good.
No.
Which is not always a good thing.
Now, in my mind, that story requires there to be an ultimate good and an ultimate evil. Right? From my reading at least, or maybe not my understanding, it doesn't always have to be this way, because for Kierkegaard, the idea of, say, the Night of Infinite Resignation, which is this idea of a character who gives his will fully to God, to some omniscient being, for that to exist as his kind of version of the existential hero, which a lot of people would disagree with me on, that is what it is, but whatever. It's my podcast, so na foo-foo to you.
Well, you just whipped out some Kierkegaard.
I'm sorry.
With the,
so, okay.
So, you know, I mean, come on, man. You got me with a half glass of Chardonnay, and
I'm sorry. Okay. So
I'm teasing.
I know you are, Marie. Come on.
I'm dead serious about that.
For listeners that don't, one of Kierkegaard's most famous works, where he develops this idea of the Night of Infinite Resignation, is this one called Fear and Trembling. And the full title is like a really actually badass title, but I'm not going to read the whole thing because I don't have it in front of me.
Oh, shit.
But the title,
we got dark.
But
we went down.
No,
folks.
we're killing it. So the idea in this story is he looks at the story of the binding of Isaac, and he thinks, well, how could God have let Abraham bind his son and go so far as to almost kill him? His only child at that point, to go so far as to almost kill him. And his argument is that for true bliss, for true, God, we can't understand God, and so what God requires of us is for us to willingly give up things in the hope that God will bring them back when God asks. So in other words, we need to resign ourselves to the fact that the way our lives are is the way it's supposed to be. And only in that resignation, only in that realization that you are as God wants you to be, and you are doing what you are giving up or doing an impossible task because it is the right thing, because it is what your God requires, that in some way gives you a kind of, not a release necessarily, but almost a
purpose. A
purpose, or like it's hard. Kierkegaard, it's hard to really understand know exactly what he meant, but whatever. Anyways,
Kierkegaard.
So the idea, so just to kind of get this full circle and finish this thought finally for you, my poor listeners, is so that to me, where there is a value, there is an ultimate good that we're striving for, an ultimate goal, even if it seems useless, even if it seems worthless from our perspective, it is an ultimate goal that we decide to follow. With existential heroes generally, the whole point is that there is no goal. There is no ultimate good. And so ultimately it becomes kind of a self-defeating or nihilistic idea, right? Which is why, in my opinion, so many of these characters end up horribly, right? They kill themselves, or they die, or they explode, or whatever. And so
I would argue, really quickly though, I would say that the reading of, like, within sort of the Joseph Campbell reading of him and him finding out that this truth is himself, isn't, like, I think it's beyond good and evil. It's like, I think it's a reconciliation of what actually is his true self, right? And his true self is it turns out to be what he thought was evil, what he thought was the thing that was what was keeping him from freedom, right? But how can you say, like, and again, even with the idea of the island, how can you say, I would argue that the island is not bad, or the village is not good or bad. It's beyond those things, because there's people on the village that happily have erased their mind and can live almost
they like a soma lifestyle. Like, they live a perfect
I mean, but and there's no judgment. They are placing absolutely no judgment on themselves. And his character number 6 is scornful, is you know, especially of the old captain. I can't remember exactly which one it was.
Yeah.
It was the old captain that plays chess, you know, and he's sort of given up, and he looks at him like he's been defeated, like he has. And again, it's this moralistic judgment, but he's transcended this character. This other character has transcended it, and he's like, I don't care. I don't want to escape. I'm not. There is no bind on my mind in this place.
Right.
Which is basically to me, it's like, again, it is sort of almost an existential reading of it. I think you can play with it both ways. It's so amazingly good.
Yeah, it is. It's very deep.
So amazing.
See, in my view, what the ending means to me of the series, and therefore the ultimate kind of wrap up of the whole thing, is that this whole series, number 6, is fighting for this one ideal, that he is a free person, that he is a free man, right? And at the end, what he comes to find out is no, he will never be a free man, right? And in that sense, Marie, I think we very much agree that the person that ultimately is the one controlling him is himself, right? There's this idea in existentialism of the gaze of the other, is what it's kind of commonly referred to. And what it is it's sort of this idea that when someone looks at you, you recognize another consciousness that is apprehending you, that is, it is looking at you and judging you and considering you. And based on that consideration and the way that you yourself take that in and then consider them, you will change and alter and limit your behavior. And so in that sense, when number 6 sees himself as number 1, I think what he's coming to realize is, I have been the one controlling myself. Like, I am the reason why I control why I do things a certain way, right? I myself am limiting my own freedom by being confined to society, by doing what is the norm, by fixing myself to these standards, to these normative things. And so, when he escapes, it no longer matters if he's in the village or not, because he's always going to be limited. He's always going to be under the constant surveillance of himself.
Or Rover.
Or the giant fucking balloon is coming. Right?
Oh, dude. I think it is like, to me, the awesome thing about this show is it's like, man, 50 years ago, and it has the same resonance. Like today.
I guarantee they tried, so they made a shitty remake of it.
Oh, shitty remake. Fuck you, AMC.
What the fuck was that? That was like, I remember being in college, and my roommates.
I was excited about it.
Me too.
I was like, oh my god, this will be great. This is the
It had oh my god. Who's the actor that it had? Magneto.
Yes.
It had Magneto from X-Men.
Gandalf. It had Gandalf in it, motherfucker.
It was supposed to be amazing. I was like, he's number 2. It's going to be the best.
And he would be a great number 2. That was a really awesome cast.
But instead, it ended up being this weird... Oh, it was unfortunate.
But one thing we should call out, and we should note, is there's actually an addendum to The Prisoner that was officially, like, sort of, I don't want to say sanctioned, but was okayed by Patrick McGowan, which is a graphic novel called The Prisoner, Shattered Visage, and it picks up at a certain point after they have closed the village, and what happens there, and what kind of is still going on, which we don't have to get into necessarily, because I bought it like a million years ago. I read it, and I can't really remember, but I remember thinking, man, that was not a bad idea.
So I have actually never read it.
Oh,
I
gotta send it to you. Oh snap!
I knew of its existence, but I kind of really liked the way, I really liked the way the series ended. Yeah.
It brings back your favorite number 2, though.
Does it really?
As well.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
It brings him back.
All right, then I'm gonna have to check it out for sure. Yeah, I gotta get it then.
And it's cool because it also so the main character, a woman, is going back to the village, and the boat she is on is called the Vorpal Blade. which is I'm pretty sure I got that right, and which is from Alice in Wonderland.
Yeah.
And it's just like it's just got these nice, neat little sort of little references that are really good. The overall story, again, it's such a visual thing. It's hard to translate into, and it was written in the '80s, so it dates itself much harder than the original series does. But still really good. Still really good. The other thing too is if dear viewers, dear listeners, if you do choose to listen to it, you should, if you get the entire series, there's a huge amount of debate of the actual order that you should watch
goodness,
them
there's a huge and honestly, I don't know, what's your favorite?
It's awesome.
What's your favorite kind of viewing order?
So, this is the story about how I got into The Prisoner. Is like I was actually studying for a final in college, and I was watching TV. It was late night. It was here in San Francisco, and I had I think PBS on, and this guy came on, and he was introducing the series, and the man's name is Scott Appel, and he is actually a huge aficionado about Philip K. Dick and about The Prisoner, and a few other he was, I believe, San Jose's film critic, but he comes out and he's dressed in the same outfit as The Prisoner, and he kind of walks through the whole logic of why he's put them in the order that PBS is going to watch him, and he's doing an intro to each one. And I'm like, who is this cat? And why is he's talked for 25 minutes about some dumb show, and then I start to watch it, and I'm like, fuck the French final. What is this? This is crazy shit. There's a giant balloon.
It's so complicated.
This guy, and they can't even get off that village, and it's this is crazy. And I think, so if you were going to watch it, I would strongly recommend the order that Scott Appel puts it in, because it makes so much more sense than the actual order that they aired them in.
Yeah, I actually have tried a bunch of different ways to watch it over the years. I actually really like there's one particular order where
we should put them in the show notes.
We absolutely will. There's one, but there are two episodes that are kind of weird that don't really fit with the whole series itself. There's an episode where he's it's in the Old West.
Oh yeah.
and there's another one that's kind of more of a normal spy thing. It's really strange, and those two episodes don't really fit with the whole thing for me. So I actually watch them in. I kind of watching them in all kinds of different orders, randomly. I always start with the first one. I always end with the last two, but I feel like I always end up either not watching those ones or watching them after the finale, actually. And there is
that's a good point.
And there is some
they're like addendums.
They're weird.
I think he showed that as well.
They're weird. They're weird secondary stories to the main story, right? And so and another interesting aspect of this too that comes up a lot is what area, what framework do you watch the Prisoner from? So in other words, is the village controlled by at this point it was the West versus Russia, right?
Yes.
Is the village controlled by Russia? Is it controlled by the United Kingdom? Is it controlled by both working in tandem?
Yes.
Right? To keep their prisoners together. So it's a really fascinating way to you kind of get a sense that it's, I think because everyone speaks with a British accent, us in America are oh, it's British, but it's that's not necessarily the case, right? So there's a lot of really,
because it's very cloying. Again, it's almost too British. It's almost the stereotype of everyone he meets is this very
they're pip pip, ridiculous.
Be seeing you, I love that.
Yeah,
it's over the top.
Yeah, so
we should put it up, because also I have done my damnedest to try, knowing that we were going to be talking about this tonight, to find Scott Appel, who is in the Bay Area. And he's a difficult man to get a hold of. I have yet to locate him.
I hope he's not on the village.
I don't know. Smelled some strange gas.
Weird stuff.
Passed out.
Weird stuff, Marie. I don't like it. You know what's actually?
I would.
Sorry,
Yes, go ahead.
I was gonna say.
No.
You know what I've actually found really interesting is, we actually found ourselves on. I actually found myself on Twitter recently going because so recently in the news there was a revelation that two really prominent conservative Twitter, I guess, personalities were actually characters created by the Russian government.
Oh,
And
fun.
Yeah, and these were people. One of them I had actually commented on one of her things, and I was like,
what's her name?
but she's gone now. She's off of Twitter. But I had commented, and I was just like, whatever, like I forget what I said, probably something like you're dumb or whatever, because I'm a child. But but yeah, like, so it actually got me now looking at people's Twitter accounts and being like, is this a real person?
Is this, who is this? Who is this that I'm trusting here, that I'm talking to, right? It's like this weird, again, and it ties in perfectly because there's this whole underlying idea of how much do you trust this person? You think you know them and they've helped you so far, or you're reading, or, it could be like, I think of like our good friend Rob.
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
Right? Your UFO guy? I don't know. I'm just going to throw it out there. I don't know. I'm not saying that he's a bot. Rob, I'm not saying you're a bot. I am saying I think you're CIA or something along those lines. And, I almost like to imagine that he's maybe just like a totally different person, like a totally different gender, totally different, and he's just sort of planting seeds of, and monitoring subversive podcasts, right?
Well, I mean, we both.
I would love that.
I still have no evidence.
Could be number one.
I have no evidence that Forrest Burgess is a real person.
Oh, he's not. No, he's not. That's actually been proven. That's not even alleged anymore. It's Scott's other voice, man. I've seen it.
Just Scott's other voice.
I can prove it. I have proof.
Wonderful. And with that, dear listeners, we are coming to another close of a Roundtable episode. I have been number 6.
I am number 2.
Wonderful. We will be back in 1 week with an episode on... What am I doing next week, Marie?
Something super sciencey and spooky and fabulous.
Yeah, it's gonna be awesome. Oh yeah, nanotechnology.
Oh my god.
Next week's episode is nanotechnology, which is
really tiny.
which is what I did my PhD on.
Oh, it's a good thing you remembered it that fast then. That's great.
Yeah, it's gonna be phenomenal. It's gonna be a really great episode. I'm super excited. As always, we want to thank you, the wonderful listeners, for supporting the show, for listening to us talk all the time.
Yes, we love
and
very much.
just for, becoming, we have a new Patreon supporter, Ranger Tim. Tim, thank you so much for supporting the show. We got a bunch of new wonderful iTunes reviews. So we're going to go through those people right now.
First of all, can I shout out Ranger Tim? What up, Ranger Tim?
Yeah. Great.
Is he like a forest? Is it a forest ranger? I like to think he's out, kind of in
I don't know. It's just his name.
Area.
It's just his name on Patreon.
That's good.
So I don't know.
Nice.
He maybe is a forest ranger. Not sure. So I have to give shout outs to Odd Traveler, Nuclear, Story Spectacular, 5 Minutes of Mine, Dr. Toboggan, Mantis.
Whoa! Dr. Toboggan.
It's
That's awesome.
It's our friend.
Nuclear.
It's our friend Brent from Hysteria 51 podcast, which is really good. 5 Minutes of Mime is from the 5 Minutes of Mime podcast, which is really cool. Check it out. It's a podcast about mimes.
Oh, yeah.
It's wonderful.
Toboggan.
Story Spectacular is a show about it's a really fascinating kind of like kid story extravaganza kind of thing. It's really good. I highly suggest you check it out. And then Odd Traveler is from the Travel Oddities podcast, which is also just wonderful. Such great shows that we're friends with here.
Man.
So check it out.
Avengers Assemble.
Avengers Assemble, truly going on over here. And yeah, that's it for this week's episode. So thank you, listeners, and we'll be seeing you.
Be seeing you.